Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. We are now entering season 5 of Harlem Stories. Thank you so much for your listenership, and we really appreciate it. Hopefully that you're getting a tremendous amount of value. I am Adam Feinberg. I am your host, and today I'm joined with my two co-hosts, Denise and Dom. You guys want to say hello?
Hello, guys. Hi.
How's it going?
How's it going?
Yes,
Wishing everyone a healthy 2026, and hopefully that we can bring some nice information
Yes.
regarding real estate to you.
And happy to be back with this lovely group and excited
right?
to get going.
Yes.
Awesome. So today what we're going to talk about is 125th Street, which is the main corridor for Harlem. We're going to talk about a lot of the changes that have taken place in recent years. And, I know since I moved here approximately 20 years ago, I've seen dramatic shift in, the way that 125th Street is. But, I was watching, I guess the remnants of the review and flashbacks of, since MTV was shutting down, that they were going and showing, a whole bunch of old videos. And I was noticing, there were at least a few that were shot, popular songs that had videos that were shot on 125th Street. So you can go and actually go and see it in video and in some of these music videos. I thought that was kind of cool when I was seeing that on the review just prior to the shutdown. So today we're going to talk about 125th Street and how it's really changed over the years. And Harlem just had this golden period, just as a whole, before things got kind of ugly for a while, and now we're, back in a resurgence, and, things have really changed. But even in the ugly years of crime and drugs, the culture thrived in Harlem, making this an amazing and truly special place to be. In the late 1990s, the scene was set up for a revival in Harlem, and in 1999, typical brownstone could be bought in Harlem for around $300,000. And of course, there are stories abound that talk about
purchasing
a Harlem brownstone for $1.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and that came about, and there were plenty of stories about that, and there were obviously some things that need to kind of had to be attached to those kind of deals, and with the renovation and duration of living on it. But it just gives you a sense of back then $300,000 could purchase you a Harlem townhouse, and as soon as you started seeing that resurgence, it only took a year once it jumped from $300,000 to $400,000.
And in 2026, what is that? What is that number? What is that number?
So yeah, that's kind of a whole different ballgame, and I think and I'm not talking about the gut renos,
right?
But if you're looking at a starter home and something that could use a little updating and something of that, you're probably looking at around 1.9-ish or so.
Yeah.
So quite a bit difference, but
big difference.
But in 2000, the city sold 13 vacant lots for $1 as an early attempt to, start to revitalize the neighborhood. And it was only about a year after that, in 2001, when former President Bill Clinton set up an office for the Clinton Foundation at 55 West 125th Street. And it kicked off with a huge street party with gospel music and soul food, and there were thousands of people in attendance. And it was at this event that many credit Bill Clinton's office moves to Harlem to lead to massive changes in the neighborhood for decades to come. And amazingly enough, to this day, the Clinton Foundation office is still located at 55 West 125th Street. So it is entirely possible that you could be along 125th Street and bump into Bill Clinton on any given day. But, my guess is he's probably there less frequently these days.
Yes.
But new buildings and business continue to transform Harlem, and more specifically 125th Street, including a few new high-rises. And, for the most part, Harlem has resisted putting giant new towers in every development location, but buildings have definitely gotten a bit taller.
I'm glad that is, because I think Harlem has the most beautiful architecture. in all of the city. That's my opinion.
No,
But
I think you're onto something, and the reasons for that are just absolutely horrific. But the reality is, I'm like, when we talk about illegal practices today, it comes to redlining. And redlining, for those that are not familiar, was a racist behavior by the banks, where they literally drew a red line on the map and said, you know what, we're not lending in around the neighborhoods that we drew a red line around. Now, that said, in a positive light of it, it actually helped preserve so much of the original architecture. So I think that's an important point that you're, bringing up at, from both a cultural perspective, from, in so many other, ways. So, like, it preserves so much of what was great here, too. If you want to look at the silver lining for a horrible process that, from the bank. So, there is at least some silver lining to that story. But, the other aspect of it is that, like, the buildings, they've gotten taller, but they have not gotten to like the heights of what you find everywhere in other neighborhoods. And I think that also helps preserve the character of the neighborhood too.
For sure.
Even when you look at these taller, newer buildings, most of them tend to be like 12 stories or less. And like you can go to the buildings, especially the new luxury condos and whatnot that have roof decks, and you can go to the top of the roof decks, and you're only 12 stories up. And the reality is, you can see almost the entire neighborhood and actually much of the city's skyline, only 12 stories up. If you go into Midtown,
you're not seeing anything.
You're not seeing anything on the 12th story. So you got no view. Your only views of your neighbors.
And you guys are up there. I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah, I mean,
if I wasn't, sort of ensconced in my neighborhood, definitely, because there's such a cultural feel when you're in Harlem.
And there is feel. That, when to expand on that, like when you're walking down the street, it actually feels like a neighborhood. People actually say hello to you.
No matter where you are.
Yeah, no matter where you are.
Yeah, it feels like a neighborhood. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, so like you go into Midtown, I don't want to bash Midtown. Midtown is great, for certain
business.
things.
For its purposes.
Yes. But, Midtown has gotten a lot more residential over the years, but it doesn't feel like a neighborhood.
Right.
It feels like you're in the middle of a business district. Yeah. So, again, not that I wanted to bash that. But in any case, long vacant lots, they've begun to fill in, and underutilized buildings have been redeveloped. There's still a lot of room for change to continue, but there's been a lot of pushback on building a lot of really tall towers, as I mentioned. And, my own personal view, not very well received by many in the community, is that if tall towers are going to be built, a major commercial corridor place is the place to build them. So, many people in the community prefer to keep 125th Street largely with smaller buildings, and I can understand that. But I think, one of these major commercial strips, if you're going to build tall buildings, I feel like that's kind of like the place to do it, not in the middle of a neighborhood.
No.
But I know there's a lot of people in the community that just want to keep preserve as much of 125th Street, 25th Street as possible. And I get it. I understand it. But at the same time, I kind of think that change is inevitable. I'd rather kind of keep it concentrated.
On one local block, And that's a block that gets a lot, more foot traffic. So that would just make more sense to have that there.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, the challenge is that the community has also been pushing for a lot more affordable housing. And I think that 125th Street and the one or two blocks surrounding it, of course, offers an amazing opportunity to fulfill this need, especially with such a well-connected opportunity for mass transit. Because if you think about it, you got the 1, the 2, the 3, the A, the C, the B, the D, the 4, 5, 6, the upcoming Q line, and of course, Metro North Station on the east side, the M60 to LaGuardia, and a lot of buses that, as well as all the shopping, supermarkets, so where else are you going to find such an amazing opportunity to add affordable housing? So again, I know the community is pushing back on it, but I think that is some of the best opportunities out there. Also, to be clear, when I talk about 125th Street, it also involves a block or two north, as well south, but of course the major shopping and entertainment will largely be focused along 125th Street. And rant over, but there might be a valid reason for large developments that may never take over 125th Street. that I don't hear discussed very often. And one other point when we talk about like things that aren't discussed very often, there's actually a fault line that runs across at least a portion of 125th Street, and it's termed the 125th Street fault line, and it runs from New Jersey along West 125th Street, and somewhere along the path it starts moving south toward the East 90s. So somewhere around like East 94th, East 96th Street area into the East River. It continues along into Roosevelt Island and into Queens. I haven't come across a whole lot of detail when it comes to development along 125th Street and this fault line, but it hasn't seemed to deter development in other locations nearby. What I do know is that, because of the fault line and the natural topography of the area, the one train is elevated and goes over a trestle bridge at 125th Street. And this also defines a natural boundary between Manhattanville and Harlem. So a lot of people, talk about like the subway, and this is one of those few places in Manhattan where the subway actually comes above ground. Mm-hmm. And for those that have a deeper curiosity about fault lines in New York City, there's a second fault line in northern Manhattan under Dyckman Street on the Inwood-Washington Heights border. And there's also a third fault line in the city running beneath Van Cortlandt Park in the Bronx. There might be more, but these are the only fault line discussions that I've come across within the borders of New York City.
And then for those who don't know, can you explain like what a fault line actually is and like what purpose it serves?
So a fault line
doesn't really serve a good purpose.
Well, I mean, at least for us city dwellers, it doesn't. But obviously, this is where the tectonic. I think that's what it is.
Tectonic.
The tectonic, thank you. Plates, meet under the crust of the earth, and I'm not a scientist especially, but I do have an interest in science, so I can tell you, occasionally these things move, and this is what causes earthquakes. So that's like the reason why I'm bringing this up is because obviously the last thing we want to do is...
we don't want to scare our listeners, though, earthquakes and all that. Let's trend on the positive.
But it really hasn't been a common thing, and these things haven't really, hit very often. But there's a lot to Manhattan's underground that we often don't discuss. But hey, maybe that's a whole separate episode of Harlem Stories. So, for example, I know with certainty there's an underground stream that runs along Convent Avenue, and it makes sense that there's a former water pumping station at Convent and 135th Street. It's now transformed into an entertainment venue called the Gatehouse along 125th. And Denise, I know when we were doing a walking tour, you were really enamored.
Yes, because of they've made it into like a mosaic. It's really interesting. And if you can, listeners, to run up there and take a look, it's nice to be up there.
Definitely worth to go check it out.
Yeah, and I did another episode about the I guess the above ground areas that are exposed by our underground water lines, and and I actually talked about that the Gatehouse, or it's now termed the Gatehouse at 135th and Convent, and I talked about how they overdeveloped these things 100+ years ago. And they just made it almost like works of art, rather than just like a utility building.
Right.
So
Beautiful.
really kind of amazing opportunities over there. And now you can have your wedding or bar mitzvah or, other large parties held there. So that's kind of cool. But before I stray too far off topic, I think it's the perfect time to go way back in time to George Washington's New York. And I seem to recall listening to another New York City podcast, and I want to give credit where credit's due, the Bowery Boys, episode 421, Evacuation Day, the forgotten holiday of the American Revolution. And they brought up an interesting bit of 125th Street area history connected to George Washington. When I was writing this, I was writing it actually the script for this episode during Thanksgiving week, and interesting because that's traditionally when Evacuation Day was celebrated, And I'm sure you guys are all wondering, what is Evacuation Day?
Yes.
So we can all think of all interesting, things, but basically it was one of those days that, and the Bowery Boys podcast actually goes up into this into detail, the days leading up to the event, but this is when the British were due to leave the country after losing the war against their former colonies. So apparently it was a pretty messy transition, and some interesting New York City history. If you go down to Bowling Green, you can actually see a monument and a flagpole that was issued where the original British flagpoles were actually held, and the flags were taken down. But it's near the bowl down Wall Street and Bowling Green Station over there. You can see a plaque commemorating Evacuation Day, and there's all sorts of interesting stories, tied to it. But apparently, I'm going to just talk about this over here. But on November 25th, 1873, George Washington rode into town, traveling from tavern to tavern on his way to the newly freed city. And one such stop involved George Washington hanging out for a few days prior to the last of the British leaving Manhattan Island in a tavern located somewhere near today's 125th Street. I, of course, had to throw in some early American history into the episode if possible. But I think that's a kind of a cool connection to think
nice
about.
bit of history there.
Yeah.
Adam,
I
didn't know all of this. So,
I didn't know
was
this either,
interesting.
but I want to say thanks to the Bowery Boys. You guys are awesome.
Thanks, Bowery Boys.
Yeah. So let's now fast forward into the modern version of Harlem. And during the 1980s and 1990s, Harlem's main commercial strip was 125th Street. It was rather run down, but that didn't really slow down real New Yorkers. It was the cultural center of Harlem and still is. The skyline may have changed quite a bit over the decades, but what's clear is that 125th Street will still remain the cultural center of Harlem. And in recent years, we've experienced that new museums, hotels, retail and residential that have recently transformed the area. So let's break this down a little bit better to get a sense of more recent changes. Much that have occurred just in the last 10 years, and it seemed to move fast forward in the last 5 years. So let's first talk about the infrastructure investments. I think everyone knows about this, and this has been in the news quite a bit. The Second Avenue line has been stop and go for many decades, but progress has finally been made to adding the Q train extension to 96th Street. And then there was a pause, and extending the line further is back in place with a few new stops ultimately going to 125th Street, adding another level to the existing Lexington Avenue station, which would make it easy to connect to the 4, 5, and 6 trains.
Let me tell you, the Q train is a savior to real estate agents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because prior to a train going up 2nd Avenue, you couldn't get anyone past. They didn't want to go to 3rd, really. But 3rd was it. No one wanted to go to 2nd because, transportation. You're stuck out there. So it has saved, us real estate agents, because now people can't say, well, I don't want to go to 2nd Avenue or 1st Avenue. I'm like, what? The Q train is right there.
It's right there.
Right there. Right there. No excuses.
Yeah, no. With that said, I think that's a great addition to where it was going over there. So, renderings show a station entrance next to the elevated train, which put at the entrance at Park Avenue, next to the Metro North station. So, in 2024, so roughly around 2 years ago, the governor proposed possibly finding funds to extend the 2nd Avenue subway even further with an east-west connection connecting to either the 2-3 lines or possibly even the ACBD trains, and even further extension to 137th Street 1 station. So imagine, if you're coming like me, I'm coming from the 140s, near Broadway, and imagine being able to easily connect to the west side. Do you know how much time that would save me? I'm like, it would open up my business too. So,
I don't know if with this, projecting this, it's going to happen in our lifetime. Look at how long. I remember driving up 2nd Avenue and seeing, signs for a new subway line, and this was back. I don't want to date myself, but this was in the mid '80s.
Yeah,
Right.
And that
Yeah.
sign is probably still up.
Exactly.
Because
Yeah.
nothing has happened.
So yes, it would be lovely.
And you know what? I'm gonna send you a picture of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, it would be lovely, but I don't think I don't know about you guys, but I know I won't be.
Well, I kind of
business.
think you've been reading my mind, because the next thing I was actually planning on saying is, well, I have my doubts about this further extension are going to happen within my lifetime. Almost precisely what you were saying there. This would be an absolutely amazing and potentially, one or perhaps a second train with easy connections from West Harlem to the Upper East Side. And right now, that same trip requires time and patience with all sorts of connections.
You can take the bus.
You can
There
take the
are
bus.
The bus is available. But the train would definitely be an easier and more timely.
Yeah, I mean, like the idea of like a one-seat commute type of opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing. And just like, I don't know about you, but I have my frustrations with the buses.
Of course.
I love the buses actually.
Me too.
I love the
But
bus.
I will agree with that. I have my frustrations.
I love the
but-
bus. You can
but
just
no.
sit and chill, watch the scenery, be
Yeah.
a voyeur, watch.
You can be on your phone.
Yeah.
You might be talking more the north-south routes rather than the east-west. But
Well, that's true too.
yeah, the east-west routes are just, I feel like I can walk faster in the majority of the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So yeah, I mean, like that and like this would actually solve that, because it would be, first east west, then north south, and I think that's really where what's really desperately needed. So another kind of infrastructure investment that we've seen is a new pedestrian bridge connecting 125th Street to Randall's Island, and that was completed in late 2024. And I went over to the Randall's Island Park Alliance website over there, and according to them, the NTA Bridges and Tunnels new south pedestrian ramp to Randall's Island Park along the RFK Triborough Bridge is finally open. Mm-hmm. The route provides more appealing, safer, and more visible ADA accessible access between 124th Street in Manhattan and the island, sweeping out from the bridge to land along the waterfront by the park's ferry dock. Whether you're walking, cycling, or using a wheelchair, this ramp makes getting to the park easier than ever and creates stronger and greener connections in our city. The living shoreline shared use path and the picnic area will be open as well. So I think that is kind of a cool thing.
I mean, it's great. I mean, I have taken that the bridge a decent amount of times with like cycling over there, getting over, and it has definitely transformed just the transportation to get to Randall's Island. So it's definitely been a great project, and
I haven't been up there.
No, it's really convenient. It's just super convenient. So
that's a
do. I mean, especially I know that they hold all those concerts in the summertime.
Concerts, the sporting events, different things like that. So it's definitely helpful.
So okay, we talked a little bit about infrastructure. What about the cultural improvements and changes? Well, one of the things that is going to be opening soon, hopefully there's a projected soft opening this year, 2031 Fifth Avenue at 125th Street, which is the National Black Theater redevelopment. It's going to be a 21-story residential, commercial, and cultural property. That'll be the new home for the National Black Theater. And, the residential, I know I've seen advertisements for this, but the residential section of the building is named Ray Harlem at 2035 Fifth Avenue. And there'll be a Pilates studio at the retail storefront. And I think, I don't know where I read this. I want to say it was the New York Times, where it was basically what they were doing was the Pilates studio was rented by a gentleman that basically was looking for some sort of affordable housing. And what he ran a Pilates studio, and he said, "Listen, I'm looking for cheap space where I can open my Pilates studio, but I'm also at the same time I need affordable housing." And they approached Ray Harlem and developers for that. So this guy has not only found himself a good deal where they've worked out a deal to keep his rent a little below, what they would have otherwise charged in exchange for, a better deal on the Pilates studio. So, and they worked out some sort of arrangement there. So I want to say it was the New York Times that I saw that in, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think that's kind of a cool development. Also, the Urban League Empowerment Center, 121 West 125th Street, And, a lot of people don't necessarily recognize that there is going to be an urban civil rights museum that's set to open upstairs in 2026. But most people today, if you ask them about the building, they might not recognize it. But if you say, hey, this is the location where Trader Joe's just opened, everyone all of a sudden now knows it. But Target and Sephora also opened in that location. And I think it's also worth mentioning that Sephora used to have a location just a couple blocks away, and they closed that and reopened in this brand new building. So that's worth mentioning. And just opened the Studio Museum in Harlem, 144 West 125th Street. Now open after a 7-year delay.
Yeah.
Designed by David Adjei. It's a modern style building, and the first exhibition featuring light sculptures by Tom Lloyd. The studio store will be on the ground level, and that, I believe, has recently opened.
That is on the list of my to-dos, yes.
Very cool.
So
yeah.
It's really, really cool exhibit.
Maybe we do that as a field trip, too.
Yeah, that'd be really awesome.
So, since we're talking about nearby over there, the Apollo Theater, 253 West 125th Street. Now, everyone knows the Apollo Theater. I mean, it's world famous and all that. But they're reopening in the summer of 2026. Construction on the theater, the soundstage, and the lobby. Programming continues down the block at the Apollo stages at the Victoria, and we'll discuss that more with the Victoria Theater redevelopment into a hotel. On the 126th Street side, it was affordable housing. There's retail in that, and of course, this expansion space for the Apollo Theater. So, I think you're really starting to now see it in terms of not only the cultural improvements, but you're talking about infrastructure improvements, new residential as well. So 600 West 125th Street at Broadway was completed in 2025. It's a new 34-story residential building designed by Renzo Piano. Building workshop, and that is in conjunction with housing for graduate students and faculty at Columbia. Now, people will know exactly the space I'm talking about because it was one of the rare former drive-thrus that was remaining in Manhattan. It was a McDonald's. Now, McDonald's has lost the drive-thru component, but they are back as a retail tenant in this brand new building.
34 stories, though. That's tall.
It is
That's
tall.
a tall one.
It absolutely stands out. But at the same time, it was Broadway and 125th.
Yeah.
I think, again,
It could do it.
and it's against the one train over there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, could you imagine a condo being built there? And I mean, I know they do this out in Brooklyn and, maybe in Queens too, where it's you have a brand new building that's right next to the subway over there, and literally that, and I know that some of them include condos as well, but I couldn't imagine a condo being built right there. So I think as far as new residential goes, I think building Columbia residential, I think that was the right place to do it too. So that was one of them. And then the other one notable over here was the Smile, 158 East 126th Street. And I don't know how to pronounce his name correctly. If you guys want to try, is it Bjarke Ingels?
Okay, or
Let's go with that.
Yeah, or Harke Engels.
Harke? Okay,
Sometimes
maybe.
the B is
silent.
Yeah.
You may be correct on that, and then I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. But it's loft rentals with amenities such as a rooftop pool, a spa, a fitness club, dance studio, and so much more. So I think that's really the perfect place to build one of these large buildings. So I think that's some other good things. So other announced changes we now talked about, cultural, infrastructure, residential. Some other announced changes, and some of these might not be happening. So we've been wondering about this space for a long time. 3rd Avenue and 125th Street. This was the former site of a Pathmark.
Pathmark, oh my goodness,
Yeah,
takes me back.
That's a throwback for you.
That's a throwback.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. But there was this Pathmark there at 3rd Avenue and 125th, and it was absolutely massive. It was actually one of the largest supermarkets in Manhattan for a period, and now, all the new, so many of the new large supermarkets out there are just got supersized. In the city, so it might not have been the largest anymore, but it was among them. before it was torn down. But the site's been long vacant, and numerous plans have never come to fruition. The last announced plan for this site is a 15-story residential building, and the prior plan was going to be an office building. So who knows what actually becomes of the site, but I know it's been talked about for a while. 58 to 62 East 125th Street, a 25-story hotel tower was announced a few years back that would require some zoning changes. If approved, it would include a 305-room hotel covering 115,000 square feet, plus more than 12,000 square feet of retail and over 5,000 square feet devoted to visual or performing arts. Being that it was announced a few years ago, I've got my doubts whether, that's going to actually move forward. The former Harlem Savings Bank on 125th Street near Lexington Avenue, demolition of a former bank building listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which does not protect from demolition. And there's a planned 8 or 9-story building which will be on the site with retail.
Wait,
So that's different. Like that kind of
places are not protected.
So there's
demolition?
all sorts of different landmark statuses. There's from the city. There's from the state. There's the national one over there. Apparently, that one does not protect from demolition.
Wow.
So yeah, and I know the state one is a lot less stringent than New York City's landmarking. So New York City's landmarking is the most stringent of the grouping, and man, it can be tough.
Reminds me of when they demolished the Penn Station.
Oh God!
Yeah, and
that was such a gem.
Jackie Kennedy had to step in and say, "Okay, historic buildings like." I think she sparked
the revolution, but it was too late for Penn Station.
It was too late for Penn Station.
But I think that was the catalyst.
You should see the beautiful, it
was this beautiful glass.
Yes, and all the beautiful. I'm losing my words.
Detail. I don't know.
Details. Okay, details that they were just
architectural details, and it was just grand. This grand space. I've got a bunch of old New York books, and you can see the pictures of Penn Station before they tore it down.
Absolutely grand.
It was this amazing space that I think
it was the grander than Grand Central.
I was gonna ask how did it compare to Grand Central?
Oh yeah, much. Yeah.
Grand Central is amazing, but that space was even better.
And I think because of what Jackie did, that has preserved Grand Central. Yeah.
All right, so to move on, 125th Street, the East Harlem Library between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, it just underwent a $21 million renovation, and it was built in 1901 with funds donated from Andrew Carnegie. So, the robber barons of the past still come up in the current generation. It's amazing what kind of contribution that they really provided to this city, 100 plus years ago, and still going strong. It created a new reading area for adults, children, teens. It restores the building facade, added an elevator, accessible ramps, restrooms on each floor, and the new flexible spaces will provide space for programming. It also created other various upgrades that have been made to the windows, the floors, technology, and HVAC systems. So bringing it up to modern standards today. 260 and 270 West 126th Street. It was a church parking lot behind the Apollo Theater to be replaced with a 95-foot tall building, a 12-story apartment building, which replaces, that doesn't exactly make sense to me, but that's what's been announced at least, which replaces a planned 42-story apartment tower that was originally planned. The current version will provide 82 apartments, average size 762 square feet, some commercial, nearly 5,000 square feet commercial space, and also a roughly 2,000 square foot community facility. So, finally on that end, 463 West 125th Street. It's a new building on a vacant lot. It planned 6 stories, 75-foot tall mixed-use building with over 12,000 square feet. Of that, over 9,000 square foot of that will be residential, 14 apartments, and a small amount of commercial. And it's likely to be a rental building. Continuing on to the next category of changes on 125th Street, the retail and commercial spaces. So, regular listeners to the Harlem Stories know that I don't like to discuss a lot of retail and commercial because it changes so quickly. A lot of times it's like, and the funny part is, as real estate agents, I know we see this all the time, is like, a broker puts in near like all these restaurants, and like they put it in, and it's like half these restaurants are gone. One of them went down during the listing. And, so that's the reason why I don't often, put too much over the the years into a lot of the stories, but there's a lot of newer, restaurants, some of them national chains, or, some of them might be an extension of like a popular location. Just for an example, like LA Suites, this is like their second location, here in New York, but, that's bigger in LA. But you got lots of chain restaurants. There's a lot of other newer retail spaces as well. There's an arcade in Harlem now on 125th Street. Places like Snipes and Fitness Factory and other locations.
Have you guys been to any great restaurants? I'm always up for a nice new restaurant with a good,
I'm
ambiance.
Trying to keep it to 125th Street, to me, kind of feels more like national chains.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
For me,
yes,
I'd say that. But we can have that conversation as a separate, thing.
Yep.
But yeah, there have been newer supermarkets either on 125th directly, which is like Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, Food Bazaar. And not too far from, the 125th Street corridor, you have like Lidl or Little, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that.
Yeah.
And Lincoln Market as well, at 300 West 122nd. You've got some new or newer hotels that have come up. The Aloft Hotel, Frederick Douglass Boulevard and 124th. And there's the Apex condos above it. I've sold a couple of apartments in the Apex. And I got to say, there's a lot of misinformation out there. It is not. And I repeat, I've confirmed this as a result, but there's a lot of brokers and bankers that think that it's a condotel, the building. It is not. It is just a straight condo, and it just happens to have 6 floors of a hotel beneath as commercial space. But not to be confused with the condotel, and a lot of people aren't sure what a condotel is, but it's basically a condo with hotel amenities. Most condotels are not easily financeable, which is the reason why I'm highlighting this. But they typically have for, like short-term stays, so like the owners can't use it as a primary residence. Again, the important distinction, the reason why I'm bringing that up, over here. But in the last year or two, there have been 2 other recent large hotel additions. There's the Renaissance New York Harlem Hotel, 233 West 125th Street. And it's above the Victoria Theater. So what they did is they kept the original Victoria Theater marquee and facade, and then they just added above it. And that's what I mentioned earlier, that there was like a commercial, the Apollo Theater rents, space there. There is affordable housing behind the hotel, accessible on 126th Street. There's retail over there. But the Victoria Restaurant and Piano Bar on the 5th floor lobby, hey, maybe that's a non-chain restaurant that's worth visiting over there. But the Apollo stages of the Victoria Theater sits on the lower floors of the hotel with 2 new flexible performance spaces run by the Apollo Theater. They're open in the historic Thomas Lamb designed Victoria Theater. For regular listeners of the Harlem Stories podcast, you'll hear the name Thomas Lamb discussed a lot because he designed a lot of the theaters up here. So, just that as an interesting point. On the 126th Street side, it's affordable rentals and there's retail space on the ground floor. Now, the most recent of the openings just happened in the last couple of months, which is the George at Columbia, the Tapestry Collection by Hilton, 412 West 126th Street. Its newest hotel of the 3 large hotels in Harlem. It opened October 2025 with 139 rooms and a small but beautiful lobby bar. It's still under construction, but there's going to be a backyard seasonal pool and ground floor restaurant. So maybe again another restaurant for us to visit. Yes. So other spaces, and I want to try and keep everything all reasonable over here. There's the Tasty Lab Factory, the former site of the Tasty Bread Factory. And, Tasty has also made like all sorts of bakery goods, like donuts and things of that nature that they were known for. But it's a new $700 million project. They were originally going to try and keep the original Tasty building factory, but unfortunately it was too far gone to save. So they built a brand new building, but it includes life science research facilities, commercial and retail space, and offices for academic or artistic uses. It also includes a pedestrianized greenway spanning 3 blocks from West 125th Street to 128th Street, snaking through the old factory and brewery buildings that have been renovated in recent years into labs and offices. It'll be built into a landscape recreation area connecting the Tasty Lab building and the former Malt House Brewery building. So, and anybody likes Yingling beer, that is part of this campus of buildings over there, and that was transformed quite a while ago. We're going to talk more about that and those buildings in additional episodes coming soon, actually this season, because I've already kind of written out a lot of what I wanted to cover in there.
Map it out.
Yeah, but great educational and workspace opportunities. So, this is, I think we covered a lot of material within the 125th Street corridor and how it's changed. I think I'm just going to leave it as I'm looking forward to the next generation of 125th Street.
Yes.
And how it progresses.
Absolutely.
But thank you for listening. If you enjoyed it, whatever podcast platform you're like, click on the
give
like
us a
button.
like. Give us a like.
And share it, with your friends, your family, your coworkers, and anyone that you think that might enjoy this podcast. But we got a lot of great material coming out this year, and hopefully you'll be there to join us.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your
listening.
time. Thank you for listening, and we hope to hear from you soon. Cheers.
Bye-bye.